questions, but we do have open-ended opportunities for you to share any comments, questions, or concerns anonymously, as well as the folks online will be able to comment. So I have sprinkled in these open question opportunities throughout the presentation at key points. Certainly feel free to interject as we're talking. Keep this rather casual. We'll just wait a little bit longer till everybody has gained access. The folks at home, they can join via the website as well. If you want to just write that code down in case you get disconnected. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. And if anybody has any concerns, please let us know. So what's a little bit different about this presentation is we're starting to structure some comments and text for the master plan document, which going to obviously have a table of contents as opposed to the agenda we're sharing. And we want to make sure everyone is comfortable with what we're going to be presenting to the community and the board. The first is the reasoning and the background for a facilities master plan, the available resources and data that we've collected, the tasks that we have completed, the concepts for debate and discussion that we have had for several months, the order of magnitude cost and implications. And at this point, we will maybe take a shift to another presentation that has been provided by the district for that financial information, highlight the engagement process, the opportunities for input, and then a summary and next steps. So the reasoning and background for a facilities master plan, for those that don't know, it is to create a long-term vision, a planning tool for the district so that you use your resources as efficiently as possible with the goal of improving learning environments across the district and making sure that there has been an opportunity for community engagement, which I would probably say, based on the presentations we've had up to date, starting way back, we've probably had, I don't know, I'd probably say a couple hundred people participate either in person or online. A relatively small sampling of the size of Christina School District, but it is not uncommon for there to be minimal participation until something really happens. And unfortunately, at that time, sometimes it's too late and the train is rolling. We don't want that to happen here. I think we've taken our time. It's gone on for several years now. We come up with a plan to move Christina forward. This facilities master plan does support Delaware Department of Education Certificate of Necessity, which you need to be financially reimbursed and share the estate and costs with a local project. Now, it's important to know that, and many of you do, that Christina has done a very good job over the last several years gathering together as many funding sources available to do a lot of projects across the district. They have been building a better learning experience, and those projects have been cataloged. They're available online. You can see what has happened over the last, I don't know, I want to say 10 years, I think, of projects. So I want to start with the Wilmington schools. So the students living in the city were the first priority for Christina School District. The Wilmington schools have been recently renovated or new. They do have facility and programmatic capacity, some of the things that we talk about in other schools that are deficient, and that they are not part of this current plan. Now, the importance of this is to have a 10-year plan so we can bring equity across the district, set the direction for development of projects, making sure that we're able to maintain what we have and be proper stewards of our buildings, build upon the work that I just talked about that Christina has done over the last 10 years. We want to plan the next 10 years worth of work, always keeping in mind that everything we do should support the educational mission and the curriculum. The types of projects that you're going to expect to see modernizations to improve the buildings, both from a facility standpoint and a programmatic standpoint. We may be constructing new or renovating buildings to be more efficient, to align with the curriculum that is changing always, and investing in facilities to improve operations and the quality of space. This may also include the arts and athletic fields. We had 3 project drivers when we started this: early education expansion, supporting the special needs programming, and district-wide building improvements that are both programmatic and infrastructure related. So I want to give those folks here and online an opportunity to share any comments. So far, I have multiple options for you throughout the presentation. So if you don't get this one, feel free to grab another one. So we'll wait a minute to see if anyone has any comments. If you have any here, just shout out. But I see a lot of familiar faces, so I'm glad you keep coming back.
Monica Moriak, board member, has her hand raised online. You want to say something, Monica?
Sure. I'm curious as we look at this 10-year plan, and I've been following the development of it, of the whole K-12 program and ideas, which has been fantastic. Is one of the ideas that we might be able to kind of move the whole kit and caboodle in about 10 years? Is that a thought, or it's, well, 10 years, but we're going to pick part of this?
So I'm going to answer that one. And I can answer the one that's on the chat at the same time. So what we're looking to do, because we want to be fiscally responsible for our taxpayers, and we want to recognize that there's already a tax burden because of projects that we have, that we want to improve the district, but we want to do it in a way that is responsible and something, quite frankly, that we can pass. If we were to try to do this all at once, one shot done, we would have 2 problems. The first is we almost certainly wouldn't get the money from the state. And the second is that our own local portion would be very high. So this goes to the answer of, will a referendum be needed? So we're going to show this a little bit later. So I won't go completely into this answer, but the answer is yes. But our goal is to try to plug this in such a way that we take advantage of debt that's falling off, right? The Overly School, we're starting to pay that one off. We have some other major renovation projects. We're starting to pay those off. So the tax rate naturally comes down as you're paying off old bonds. So our goal is, well, we will certainly have to go to referendum, and we're going to show some numbers here, like I said, a little while. The goal is actual impact on taxpayers to be minimal, because we'll be kind of plugging things in as other things fall off. So the overall impact on your bill won't be dramatic. But again, we'll go into heavy details on that later. But hopefully so the full answer to your question is, we're looking at probably 3 separate referendums as part of this. The first project, being either the elementary, the middle, or the high school. We've been talking about elementary or middle. Middle was the #1 choice the last time, but that's much more expensive project. The elementary, and then the high school. So we're looking at 3 referendums across the 10 years so that we would fund those projects iteratively. We also would have to each time submit a new certificate of necessity to the state and get their approval for their portion of the money, which is roughly 60%. So obviously that's important, because if we don't get that, then, and we try to do it all local, that just, it's not feasible.
That sounds good. Thanks. It sounded like it could be a good 10-year plan. I wonder if that's what we were talking about. In an ideal world, we just slowly go through the entire plan over approximately 10 years. Okay, that makes sense.
With right now, we're looking at, in the planning stages, 3 separate referendums.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
And as we go through the presentation, it may just organically surface on how that could work within the district based on current conditions and variables that could change over the next 5-7 years. There are two other comments here. One is multiple comments. Was a district-wide new feeder pattern thought about before we go into a capital referendum, possibly allowing for our middle schools that are not at capacity to be better utilized? So we talked about the middle school projects within this presentation, and we can talk about that comment again. We did not conduct a new district-wide feeder pattern. But we do know based on maybe the elementary school project, that would likely require a redistricting, and that at that time, that activity would occur. Next, can we have a town hall or presentation to show the numbers better to help the community understand the timeline? We have some financial information that we'll be presenting. How that relates to a timeline is a great comment, and I think we should incorporate that into the plan. Is there a possibility to consolidate our middle schools and high schools down by one of each, so there are less buildings to update due to capacity and utilization? And again, we're going to talk about this. We have some comments on our suggestions, and as I was saying earlier, organically, some projects may surface to be on the farther end of that 10-year period, allowing time for other things to happen, such as the Reading plan, the implications of that, et cetera. So we keep all of these. These are all recorded through this process. So we'll make sure we address these comments.
When we get to each of those sections, if we don't answer the question, bring them up again.
Yes, thank you.
But I think we're going to answer all those.
So the available resources and data, we've conducted facility condition assessments. Dave has a copy of it there. It's been shared with the district multiple times, and they're sort of using that as they're going through their minor cap planning process. Capacity enrollment analysis, we'll talk about that. We've had multiple discussions and presentations. We visited the sites, and we hope that you have felt engaged throughout the entire process. So let's start with the facility condition assessments. This was our assessment of the buildings based on projects that would need to be done over the next 10 years to make everything like new. All right. So when we went through, you see that there is obviously work at all of the elementary schools. Oberly had the least amount of work at your newest school. And that generally arranged around, we'll say, I don't know, maybe $8 million average across all these elementary schools. When we look at the middle schools, Gulger, Cobbs, and Kurt were about the same. Shumadill, much higher. When we look at the high schools, Glasgow and Newark are about the same. Christiana, much higher. So it is not uncommon for municipalities and school districts to have deferred maintenance. Everyone does. It's the challenge to manage properly in accordance with your funding. So let's look a little bit closer at the elementary school. So if we look at the elementary schools from deferred maintenance or capital improvements over the next 10 years, you'd need like $81 million over these 14 elementaries. Now, no one ever zeroes these out. So do not be alarmed by that. At best, you start to get the high priority projects. So as you see, with the exception of Oberly, they're all about the same.
Just to put a little bit finer point on that, over the last 5 years, with the money that we received from COVID, the highest priority projects that were not funded in the last referendum are done. Right, so we had some high priority projects. Brader, for example, we have too many B schools. Brader, for example, was a really high priority HVAC project. It's done, right? It wasn't funded by the state. We didn't fund it because we didn't get state money, but now it's done, right? So just to put a finer point on how we use COVID money to actually tick off some of the most priority projects.
Absolutely, and that was the right move. So Are there opportunities at the elementary school level? Certainly. There's always room for building improvements and maybe some enhancements because we understand the special needs programming at the elementary school level is challenging because it seems to be where we can ever fit them in. Next is the middle school. And if we're only looking at, I'm sorry, I should go back. When I say the priority one projects of 81 million, those are projects that are like the end of the useful life of equipment. Maybe finishes are worn. This isn't about 3 to 5 years. This is what we would recommend. At the middle school, same thing, 3 to 5 years to start some projects. They're almost equal in terms of their deficiency. And these three schools total almost $79 million. So there is significant needs there. But again, there's opportunities for some modernizations or demolition and replacement of some of these buildings as they start to approach a significant amount of need. And if we look at the high schools, and they're relatively about the same, about 117 million. Again, significant needs and opportunities for modernizations or adaptive reuse or the beginning of considerations for consolidation based on some enrollment and capacities that we're going to talk about.
I have one thing here.
Yep.
So the last many years, we have, what we use for maintenance, right? So what we're talking about here is deferred maintenance, right? Maintenance that we know we need, but we didn't have the money to pay for it yet. The whole district, we get roughly, the whole state, we get roughly $15 million a year, of which we get 300 or 3 million. Roughly 3 million. This year, first time in a long time, let's hope it's the new normal. It's 60 million, or I'm sorry, it's 30 million. So we will get 6 million, roughly. That is a good news story for, that's really how you're supposed to take care of a lot of these maintenance projects, right? Is through that money. So that's 6 million a year, hopefully from now into the future, which will help us to tick off some of these projects we won't have to do in referendum. Other projects we'll have to do through capital improvement.
So I want to talk about enrollment and capacity, and I want to explain.
Can I ask a quick question related to that, Dr. Shelton?
Certainly.
When we get some money for minor cap, so now the 6 million, is there a portion that we have to do as a match?
Yes, it's not that we have to do, it's that we're authorized to do a match.
Okay, all right.
And that goes into the tax rate that we set at the July meeting.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I wasn't positive. Okay, thank you.
So I want to explain this chart and the black dotted line that we have at the elementary school level, which is in blue, the middle school in green, and the high schools in orange. This is based off square foot per student, right? How many square feet is it per student in each building? When the schools are above this dotted line, that means there is more square feet per student. That means that the building is under capacity or underutilized because these black lines represent like the ideal zone. The amount of square footage that should be for a student. If you have more square feet per student above the ideal range, well, that means your building is under capacity. It's underutilized. If you are below the bar, that means you are potentially overcrowded or over capacity. And there's only one school that is very close to that, and that's Gallagher. And I believe that has a program associated with it that may speak to that.
There's two things that this data doesn't completely capture. The first is the virtual academy, which is why Gallagher's over capacity, right? Because they have kids that are on their rolls that don't ever walk in the door. And then the other one, you'll notice the schools that have capacity, Raider, Brookside, McClary, Wilson, those are the schools that we house lots of special programs. So while it looks like capacity, because the capacity is a room of 22, 25, 30, we're using the entire space of a room, but we only have 6 kids in it because it's a DAP or a REACH classroom. So we have to take that into account when we think about capacities our special programs do affect. And we have special programs is where all of our growth is big. We know that. Some people better than others. All of our growth has been in special programs over the last few years.
And that's why it was one of our guiding principles.
I have another question. Why can we not somehow show that in our capacity, right? Because the public sees this and says, I don't know why you're having all these issues. Look at all the space you have. There's not a way to kind of have this show that.
It has to do with whether we're gonna use a formula, whether we're gonna walk around room to room and just count. Oh, that's full. Oh, that's not full. And it also has to do with schedule, especially when you're talking middle school and high school, because there can be different classes using the same room and there can be classes, it's empty, right? It's empty this period. Well, it's because it's the teacher's planning period, right? And you don't usually take away their classroom for their planning period unless you're over capacity and are forced to do that because teachers want to be able to set up in their room during their planning period.
So I think when we do the report, we will have narratives associated with these diagrams. I have other slides that speak to some of the programs that Dr. Shelton had mentioned, so we'll make sure that we include that in our final report.
That sounds good. I just feel like that chart feels misleading from a public standpoint, and I wonder if some way that we can communicate what is our reality better, especially the pushback that we seem to get from our community. It's a thought.
Noted, thank you.
Seeing the slide before, could you go back? Is there what I think she's asking, and I would say the community would ask the same thing. Is there a way we could put, Dr. Sheldon, a bar next to it that's set next to each one that says special programming? So literally within that same slide, it would show the capacities based on our special programs versus the square footage. So it's on the same slide so that they can compare apples to apples. Because she's saying exactly what the community says when we go out for a referendum. Is that looks like we've got all these schools that are above capacity. We all know that that's not true necessarily based on the programs. But somebody that's not living in those buildings don't necessarily understand that. And so to get the community to have buy-in for a capital referendum, that's a very good visual that they're going to want to see. But it doesn't, a narrative doesn't help with a side-by-side graph.
Okay.
Literally in another color sitting next to each school.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely.
We have a comment on
Yes.
that. Person says, maybe this was taken into consideration and it just hasn't been discussed. However, square foot per student does not take into consideration the needs of students with IEPs. For example, students in certain special education settings require small group learning settings, but are not part of the programs in DAP/REACH. If possible, I would like to see this in the calculation as well.
Yeah, so it's easier to calculate that, the B and C setting kids. It's easier to calculate them in than it is the special programs, because the B and C setting kids are still on the rolls of the school. The special programs kids don't even show up in the enrollment of the school. That's where it becomes even more problematic.
Are REACH and Brenham show up for ways?
It depends on which role you're pulling.
It depends on what you're pulling out. That's a building location as opposed to funding building. So,
But that's what I'm saying is per building, if each building could put like their special programs, DAP, REACH, setting Cs next to that bar graph so that you can see like, and I'll just use the city's 2 schools that are already on there. Bancroft has all of them and Bayer doesn't have DAP and REACH. So the number, we have, way more rooms needed for that smaller setting at Bancroft than than you do at Byard, because both that and Reach are housed there. Not to mention all the setting Cs that are smaller settings and
But
so on.
since those
So-
two buildings were recently done, that was taken into account during the building.
Right. So what I'm saying is because the community, we know that within our district and we understand that, but these slides have to be for our community at large that's voting for that capital referendum, and we have to go out there and convince them of that, and a visual that has that. They don't understand when we say special programs, we're talking about GAP, REACH, setting C, like there's an all encompassing. They have, a lot of our community members don't know that, so having that visual right there on that would be really helpful.
No, I appreciate that, and I completely agree. This is a slide that we presented probably like a year ago, and I have not brought it back since. I'm glad I did, so fresh eyes, new comments. Absolutely the whole idea of having these sessions. This is a map of the elementary schools. Now, when we look at that, you have 14 elementary schools and 1 early education center, which is identified by that red dot. In general, the schools are optimally utilized. Utilized is not the same as capacity. So they're optimally utilized at approximately 85 to 95%. Leisure, however, is the least utilized at approximately 70%. When we look at the middle schools, in general, the middle schools are underutilized, meaning the building is larger than it needs to be to support the number of students. Currently, Kirk is at 678 with a capacity of about 1,000. Shumadil, 807 with a capacity of maybe 1,200. Golger Cobb, 734 at a capacity of 1,400.
Keeping in mind that that's also formulaic based on full classes, and we have special programs at all 3 of those schools.
Absolutely. And we talked about, is consolidation of a middle school the right idea? Not included in this presentation, but in previous are reasons why we say that a middle school should be like in a 600 to 800 student range. Smaller middle schools are much more successful. When we look at the size of the buildings, Kirk is 124,000, Shumadil 154,000, Golger Cobb's a whopping 187,000. That is a very large building for 734 students even with special programs. The high schools, Newark High School is underutilized, Glasgow High School is underutilized, Christiana is at optimal utilization. Newark has an enrollment of about 1,000 with a capacity for 1,700, Glasgow 907, the capacity about 1,200, Christiana 1,340 with a capacity of 1,350. So we wanted to take all that information, in addition to the feedback that you've given us for presentations and site visits, the interactive polling that we've had, the open discussion that we've had, and we have welcomed your feedback. And the key takeaways from this. And this is a new slide for you all. There is still, and we can add to this. Number one, there is still a facility improvement need. There always will be. There are buildings at all grade levels that are underutilized. There is space for adaptive reuse, consolidation. There remains a special education space need. There remains an early education space need. The future of the high schools is a variable. What could happen with enrollment in the next 5 years or so? And the middle schools, based on our site visits, do not exhibit building qualities conducive to what we call new century teaching and learning. How you want to deliver education for the next 50 years. When we walk through your middle schools, we don't see a building that supports that. The building is warm, it's safe, it's dry, but for the next 50 years? Is it going to support the way you want to deliver curriculum? So based on what I've said so far, our available resources and the key points, are there any questions, comments, or concerns that you want to share at this point? And again, you'll have multiple opportunities.
You just said planning a building for 50 years, is that the anticipated life?
That's what you're supposed to. That's 50 years.
That seems long.
It is long, but in some jurisdictions that we work, we are charged with designing a 50-year building.
We have buildings.
Well,
Way older.
I know, but I mean, 50 years is just a long time to think about what the educational needs in 50 years.
Exactly, right? Who
So-
knows what school
It
is
would
gonna be?
be lovely to be able to, every 50 years, know that we're gonna be able to replace the building.
Right.
We really need to build a building that we think can last 100 years with maybe some slight renovation, because that's probably the next opportunity we'll get to actually replace it. But you're right, the ideal would be.
These are generational opportunities, and I think that's where Christina finds itself right now. At a key point to make a generational impact. And it doesn't happen at one time, right? We're talking a 10-year window to try to make this 50-year change. Is the 1,200 for Glasgow minus the district office space? Yes.
I'm nearly positive you took that. So did you guys hear that online? I hope they did. The answer was yes, they did take into account the area that district office occupies in Glasgow has been removed from the square footage for capacity sake. Because it's no longer Glasgow capacity.
With the consideration of special programs being housed in the so-called underutilized buildings, can we really say with full certainty that CSD buildings are underutilized? I can say that they are not optimized. And the whole special needs thing is almost like water. It's fluid. It's filling in areas that you are all trying to figure out each year. What we'd like to give you is a portfolio of buildings where you can do some real strategic planning at each school to better be prepared to handle the students that are coming there with those needs. So I think when we do some new charting that may hit these programs, that may show a different story. However, we still think there is a lot of room for optimization in these buildings, based on our experience in K-12 markets with buildings of this size and grade configurations. Here's a comment. Elementary schools being full now could affect next 10 years as those kids are going into the high schools, assuming they stay with our feeder. Is that considered for utilization? So we have a demographic study that is ongoing that will help us project that. Glasgow has grown by over 200 students in the last 3 years. Was that considered? Well, I'd say we have accounted for the current enrollment. The fact that it grew 200 students over the last 3 years is, I mean, not relevant to us. We just worried about what it is today.
It's definitely a consideration as we look at what are we gonna do.
Oh, there was one more comment. Let me go back.
I have a comment online.
What is that noise?
It's something's tapping in the ceiling.
Sorry, those online, there's a really annoying tapping that is intermittent in our room.
Facility need. It's a facility need an upgrade of the class.
Maybe it's also, right?
It'll crash through the vent.
Which planted an energizing button up there.
So here's a comment that you may be able to help me with, Dr. Shelton. What did or how did the removal of the 6th through 8th graders from our traditional middle schools and placing them in at Christiana High School Honors Academy? Long term, will this continue to affect our middle schools?
So obviously, if we had not done that, we would have additional kids in the other 3 middle schools. It has been taken into account. We had actually long discussions about that when we were having the conversations about the middle school plan. There was lots of conversations at the Honors Academy. Do we move it back to one of the traditional middle schools to fill up some space, like, because Shoe kind of had the most space. But in the end, 2 things came out of that conversation. The first is that the Christina High School Honors Academy, Middle School Honors Academy is one of the gems of our district. And why would you want to move and mess up one of the best things we have going in the district? It's the #1 middle school in the state right now. And the second was, as we do that potential movement, what do we really gain? Because there has been some discussion about how to, and you're gonna see it in a couple slides probably, when we do the potential middle school plan, it will already address some of that capacity issue, so.
Said there was a question online?
Yes, it's odd that Newark seems to have more spots available. However, Glasgow is considered more underutilized. Is there more information available on this?
I don't understand the
Let me
question.
read again.
Because it goes back, it's the same question I asked about. So the number of people and square footage versus your graph that says which one is underutilized. So like your graph shows that McVeigh and McClary are underutilized, but your numbers in statistics said leisure was.
Yeah.
So the same thing was true with the middle school. When you look at the next screen versus the square footage, people don't understand square footage versus kids in building. That's the
Kids
hard
in
thing.
classrooms. It's really kids in
We'll
classrooms.
call them kids in building because at Wilson, you don't really have walls.
But the square,
I'm just gonna call them
the
kids.
square footage does take into account kids in building.
Once again.
The issue is in classrooms, when you're doing utilization, it's a small number of kids fill a classroom.
Dan, you're explaining this to me, and I already know this. What I'm saying is, we need to explain this to the public
Yeah, and I
that has
think-
to vote. So if somebody online is asking that question, that my guess is has something to do with us already, we need to take that into account as we go out.
No, we absolutely have to.
I agree.
So the terminology of underutilization and under optimization, they're different. Do we have to use underutilization? Because under optimization suggests we're just not using the space well, as opposed to being a numbers shortage, right? I think the community will respond better to under optimized than underutilized.
And to that,
If we can get rid of utilization and just use under
Because to
optimized
that
or
end-
not optimized.
this presentation has been shown, like you said, multiple times, and people sitting in the room will say, I know this. People have come out to me, like, and asking me questions, and I'm like, yes, I know, I've seen it, I understand it, but they don't. So the first thing that I got asked was, well, if we have this much space at these 3 middle schools, it's real simple. Collapse one of the middle schools and put the kids into the other 2. Don't build a new one. Why would you go ask for referendum money? Like, this is narrowing it down to basic. I don't have anything to do with the district. I'm just about, my tax dollars. Why wouldn't you move the kids in the high schools down to 2, middle schools down to, get rid of each one, which somebody made a comment about. And then focus on those. Why would you build a new school when you're already underutilizing the ones we have? That's where the disconnect is to the community that we need to fix. And however the presentations need to look, we need to do that because their community is a one-shot visual learner. So I need to be able to put up one screen that gets it all to them, that they see that one screen visual. I don't have time to you don't have their attention to explain it. They need to, like the bird. I can say his HVAC system needs help because it's making noise. They understand that. We're all laughing about it, but like those are things that the community needs to see. So the under explanation and the vocabulary that we use in the educational arena, like special programs, we all know what special programs are. They're whole umbrella. But in the community, special programs doesn't mean anything to them. So we need to get the visuals out there if we're looking to go to Capitol. And even if we're looking to just tell them, we do this all the time in our district, we don't tell them what we do well because we fail to get the facts, the little itty bitty things out there in something that they can understand.
Good points.
There's no fun.
That capture what you're saying.
The supporting that comment, the utilization graphs are misleading, or really misleading. So we will work to improve that. Was the fact that Newark Charter School within our feeder area K-12 added 30 seats?
That's already happened. So we had that effect already. And it did change a couple of our elementary schools. That actually it changed elementary schools that it didn't used to affect. Were affected.
I have another comment online. This is I feel like a population growth study is needed to project which high school is likely to have more enrollment in the next 5 years. For example, if Glasgow Feeder is projected to have the most growth in the next 5 years, limiting the capacity is counterproductive and short-sighted. If a population study has been done, would we be able to see that figure into the calculations as well?
Yes, so there's a demographic study ongoing now that should be done in the next few weeks. And also the Reading plan, if there's going to be 500 students less as well. So some of the concepts for debate and discussion that were presented online that we're going to go through begin with converting Leisure Elementary into a pre-K center, replacing Gulger Cobb's Middle School with a new school at the same location, making building improvements to Kirk Middle School, major additions and renovations to Shumadill that would include demolishing a portion of that building, building improvements to all 3 high schools based on the facility conditions report that we had, based on things that we've seen at the high school walkthroughs. And again, maybe focusing on Glasgow High School, reducing some capacity and spreading it to Newark High School and Christiana, allowing the area to move staff from Eden and consolidate the administrative office here. And then maybe relocate Network School to Glasgow High School to get out of a large lease. So we're going to go through these concepts. So converting Leisure to a pre-K center. In our opinion, this is an adaptive reuse of a strategically located, underutilized elementary school that would add approximately 31 classrooms to the inventory. It would require redistricting of all the elementary schools, leveling all of them out. Select improvements to the restrooms and outdoor play areas at Leisure. All other schools will remain K through 5th grade. If we look at this map, if we look at the red dotted line, which is 95, which sort of bisects the district north and south. Leisure is right along Route 40, where there is a need for early education. Elementary school redistricting across the entire district would allow us to maybe better understand where we can find room for special programs and permanently identify those spaces. And this doubles your capacity for early education going forward over the next 10, 20 years.
And currently Seek is completely maxed out. Like waiting list maxed out.
One of the really good things that you explained before that I think needs to be understood for the public is the reason why Leisure was picked. It wasn't on the screen because it has a bathroom in every classroom, so it has to take the least amount of manipulation to do. But once again, that's really important because if I'm a Leisure parent and I'm looking at the statistic, I'm going to say, why did you choose this school? So being able to say to the public that, like I can speak from when we lost Pulaski to go to bankrupt. I was like, what do you mean we lost a bathroom in every school to go to this big, huge monstrosity on the other side of town? So I think that's one of those things that's very important, and for some reason it was on your slide before and it's not. It used to be on that slide.
Yeah, there's a lot, we have a lot of information and unless we all want to sit through 100 slides.
Right, but I'm just saying the public, that literally that statement was on the bottom, so when you presented it in the past in a board meeting, it literally said that, so that people understood what got in there. That's why leisure was kept, to make complete sense to the public.
Yep, absolutely.
It's a person online saying leisure elementary schools for special needs programs classes are overcrowded. There are 2 classes in one.
Yes,
That's the driver being our special programs, which is our students with disabilities are what we're talking about when we're talking about special programs. And doesn't matter what school you talk about, we don't have the space utilized correctly to get what we really need for those programs, because those programs have continued to grow, even though overall in our district, we've seen a very slight decline. Like it was 30 kids last year, like it's a very slight decline. But I believe it was either last year or 2 years ago, we actually had a larger increase in unit count than we had students that came in. So we added a few students, but our unit count went up more than the number of students. Well, how the heck is that? That doesn't make any sense, because we were losing a few regular ed kids and we were gaining lots of special ed kids. That's how, so our district is growing strongly in special education and students with significant disabilities, not just disabilities, but significant disabilities. So that's how our shift has happened, and why a lot of our schools have classrooms with these small class sizes, because that's absolutely what those students need.
so in addition to the floor plan that would identify a restroom at each classroom, which we're not presenting here, I did want to talk about the site and just comment that really minimal site modifications are necessary to make this conversion.
Hi, can I say something? My name is Sherelle Heyman. I'm a parent of a disability child that goes to a leisure elementary school. And the classes are overcrowded for the special needs program, and the teachers there, they are wonderful, but they are struggling to do their academically lessons with having 2 kids. Not 2 kids, 2 classes in one. These kids get over stimming. So there is going to be some type of situations to fix that. It's also a safe issue for the teachers and the students that they had went through this year, the school year. It's very concerning as for me as a parent and as my child and other parents, students there. It makes it very challenging, as I had seen, for the teachers to go on with the lesson plan with having 2 classes, and it's pretty full and it's tight, and to go on with the lessons.
Yep. You're absolutely, that's why that's our number 1 driver. The two biggest drivers were early childhood education, because we don't have room for preschool right now, and special programs, because we know that buildings that currently are housing them, we don't have enough classrooms to get them spread out anymore. Because that's been the rising population. The goal here is to fix the problem you're talking about, right through your comment.
So just another comment
Thank you.
following on that, putting out the numbers to the community, again, making sure the community understands. Is it possible not to just put per student numbers, but like the number of special needs? What percentage of the student?
Yeah, that's what I think the visual that's the visual we need to add.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yes, I do
Yeah.
agree with that.
Right.
Yes, I really do. It would make the community to see it better.
Absolutely.
The amount of rooms that is
Literally,
there,
yeah, same slide.
and the amount of rooms needed to
Right.
support, I think that would make a lot of sense.
So the value added benefits of this move is that it does expand early education along Route 40. It does maximize the efficiencies of the building and the resources. We hope to support special education programming by doing this redistricting and spreading it out and try to maintain equity across the district with early education opportunities, north and south.
This is a similar, by the way, the early childhood part of it is similar to what we've already done in Wilmington. Right now, the west side has a preschool and then a 1 to 8, I always missed that one. And on the east side, they have a preschool and a 1 to 8. So it mirrors, not exactly because of the middle school elementary combination, but it mirrors the idea that, you know, they're disparate, they're separated by 95 as well. Just in a different location, that we have preschool and an elementary feeder that are a little bit more in line.
Additionally, when we talk about the value of this elementary school level program, we do want to make sure that we address warm, safe, and dry projects throughout all of the elementary schools. This is really a total elementary school package, total investment, as well as provide enhancements to the facilities for special education, which is what we're talking about. So that typical scope of work at those other elementary schools based on our facility condition assessment could vary from site improvements, playgrounds, all the way up to maybe some electrical and fire protection work that may be necessary to support HVAC or ventilation projects that were not already completed, any changes to security, ADA, restrooms, et cetera.
Can I ask a question about the playgrounds? Is there consideration maybe to also state to families of students with disabilities that there is a consideration for playgrounds being accessible?
Yeah,
Yes,
good point.
that's a big deal.
That's a good point. Thank you. So the order of magnitude for the elementary school package is about 72.5 million. Obviously, significant amount of that, almost all of it, is spread throughout all elementary schools. We have a minimal investment, we think, of about 5 million to convert leisure. It would involve lowering the toilets and all those restrooms that are adjacent to every classroom and other modifications for, you know, the correct population. It includes converting leisure to our early education center, select improvements at all the elementary schools. So any questions, comments, or concerns about the elementary school concept or package that we just spoke about? Other than what we've already mentioned.
Do you know how many elementary schools didn't have their HVAC upgraded? Because that was always, quality of environment was always a big sticking point with the staff. Do we know how many still do not after we were done with?
Can't off the top of my head, but if I look at the map, I can.
It seems like most of them, if I look at each like board over the last couple of years, I didn't know if we could come back with that as part of our, that most of these have been done.
So done is a relative term.
Yeah.
Because, for example, West Park was done in West Park is one of the more recent renovations we had done. Not the most recent, but one of the more recent renovations. But that was still 15 years ago, maybe. Maybe longer.
How many have been recently done with the, or had a like lower, like had the system?
So we had
upgraded
two done,
since- 2
elementaries done on the referendum. That was Leisure and Marshall. And then we had Raider.
I know this sounds,
I can't off the top of my head.
I know this sounds terrible. So like
George.
within the building, you know, we talked about special needs kids needing quality of the air and staff needing quality of air. But they're hard to see. People see new playgrounds. You don't see a new HVAC system. And even though it's one of the most important pieces, which you can't, once again, they want to see, like you said, updating the finishes. So the question becomes, how do we leverage that to our community, like she said, new playgrounds that they see with updates, but also leveraging that with the things that they don't see, like how many, I was just wondering how many of that, what was it, 76? Just how many still needed to be done because they're at their end of life. And a lot of people don't understand that just because you don't see it, doesn't mean it's not at the top of the priority list.
Sure. So I think it's all about communication. We have the information. We certainly can work with George as we put together this final report. A couple comments here. If leisure is pre-K now, how does that support special education getting more space? They won't be able to get there past kindergarten. So what we're hoping is when we redistrict throughout the entire district, that we're going to see opportunities when we optimize the school a little bit better. That's what we want to see. What is available for special education at each elementary school instead of just trying to fit them in here and there. We want to rebalance everything. What would be for the plan for leisure students and staff after the conversion?
So that would be as part of the redistricting, right? So we're not that far yet, but and that's not part of this kind of a plan, right? That's after you get the money and you figure out what you're doing is making sure we have the entire who goes where. That wouldn't be on the front end, that would be on the back end. We know we would have to redistrict, all the leisure kids would be relocated. Most likely, just based on geography, to Overly and to Marshall, most likely. And then some kids from Overly and Marshall would move to Jones and Keene, right? And then a smaller group may move, like it'll end up being, and then it'll wrap around the whole district. But that'll get done by contract. They will do that. And when they look at it, they will be looking at filling spaces that are underutilized. So more kids go maybe to Wilson than some of the other schools because they have a little bit more space. And by doing that, we now free up a couple more classrooms at Marshall, for example. By freeing up those classrooms at Marshall, we now have capacity for feeder students that are in special programs. Where right now, Marshall is a good example of there's no special programs at Marshall because they're at capacity and over capacity in some years with just their feeder kids. So the way special programs has had to operate is when feeder patterns fill up, they get pushed out because the space wasn't there originally. And then they find spaces that have been underutilized where a classroom, oh, we dropped a fourth grade class this year. If that ever touches Heather's ears, she hears it's a fourth grade class got dropped, she is on the phone with that principal the same day to get that class for her program. It's just the way it's working right now.
Some other comments here. Is state money available for additions for buildings that house statewide programs such as DAP to add space for special programs?
Yes. So when we're doing special programs, we can, when we do additions, apply for 100% state share for the only for the classrooms that are for the special programs. So that the answer to the question is yes, but it's a little bit more confusing than that.
If data is being shared about population, could we share how many teachers are sharing classrooms now? Like special population sharing one classroom, 3 classes?
So I don't think we have any 1 for 3. We do have some 1 for 2. I don't have those numbers. But it's something that it's something we need to look at when we're talking about utilization.
Another comment, I think we need push students to go back to their home districts as some special populations have grown students in a few months with limited, and there may be another slide here, it continues on.
Yeah, so we are blessed in Christina School District with a well-recognized program for students with autism. And the staff there is amazing. And because of that, we have a lot of people that want to use that program, whether it's through IEP placement, whether it's through, sometimes they move here just to be part of that program. I know within the school, there's this push that we just don't have room for, kids from these other districts anymore, but our kids come first. And if we send them back to a district that doesn't have a program that can support the kids, we're not supporting the kid. We gotta support the kids.
Another comment, while this is a 3 to 5 year plan, which I would like to correct that, it's more like,
Stretch that to 10.
yeah, 10-year plan. Is there consideration to make repairs, renovations, and in some cases replace playground equipment at leisure? It's urgently needed.
Yeah, so I don't know if Leisure's next on the list. George is online, not here tonight, but George has a plan for playgrounds. Is it 2 a year or 1 a year, George? Or,
I did not mean it.
it's 2. So we have a current plan with our minor cap that we get, that he's replacing 2 playgrounds every summer. So at some point in time, they'll all get redone.
Sorry.
As far as maintenance goes, again, that roughly $6 million, very rough, $6 million, that's what we do every year with that money. That money is used for our maintenance. Now, some of that maintenance isn't showing in deferred, right? He has a contract with plumbers for, the sink or the toilet that goes down, that's just regular maintenance, not deferred. But there's a chunk of it that is also then going to deferred. So the answer again to that question is yes, but it's deeper than that.
Questions online too.
Okay,
One is, I think we might have answered this earlier, but does this mean SEEK will move to leisure, or will there be 2 early education centers in this area?
2. And the issue right now is we cannot provide early education in Christina School District using best practices. There's no room for typicals at SEEK, and typicals are the best practice for early childhood education. Once we have roughly half of the population over on Route 40, now both facilities will be able to operate using best practices with the inclusion of typical peers, which is the only way for us to teach our students with disabilities in early childhood. You have to have typical peers.
Next question is, Marshall's highback is still not working effectively after 2 years. Please make sure when you use the monies to upgrade the highback, you hire not the lowest bid, but the most competent, please.
So
And
please talk to your legislature, because there is state law requires us to use the lowest bid. However, issues that we do find, they are responsible for fixing, so.
last question is, don't forget that along with classroom space for special needs students, the staff need meeting space for the several IEP, et cetera, meetings per year. As a retired Brennan School Secretary, we often scramble for just a desk in a semi-private area meeting, especially at the elementary level.
Yep, absolutely.
clicker doesn't work anymore. Let's see.
Oh,
Can-
sorry. Yeah, I'm trying to do multiple things.
That's all right, maybe just hit the right arrow.
You're good.
Oh, good. Okay. The middle school programs, Kirk, Shumadale, Cobb's, and the academy at Christiana High School. Just wanted you to geographically orient yourself with where these buildings are. So one of the topics for discussion is the replacement of Gogurt Cobb. Well, before I'll even start, there are 3 middle schools. Consolidating to only 2 would give you 2 very large middle schools. You certainly could do that, but based on best practice, based on our experience and what many others have said, a smaller middle school is best. Our advice would be to not consolidate to only 2 middle schools.
And if we consolidate, we'd have to put an addition on those 2.
Oh, yeah, they're not big enough, but they're larger from what you need, but not large enough to handle the additional.
We'd have to do something either way.
Yes, and as I mentioned, the middle schools are not, from a facility standpoint, already the best position to provide a high, a more new century teaching and learning at the middle school level. And just imagine you have a average building that you're going to put a lot more students in. You're not setting yourself up to be successful at the middle school level, which we know is a challenging time. So that's why this idea of replacing Gulger Cobbs, and we'll talk about why as we go through this. But the building does have high facility needs. We recommend right sizing the building. It's very, very large for the population. Replacement of what we consider an educationally inadequate facility, really. Due to its lack of natural light, interior classrooms, it is not a building that's conducive for teaching and learning. And there is a large site associated with that. This is the parcels. If you have been there, you're all familiar with this building. My gosh, there's probably only like less than a dozen windows on a building that's 184,000 square feet. This is like an Amazon warehouse building, not a middle school. So at very high level, we were just thinking, how would a new facility come on this site? How would it work? We would consider optimizing that baseball field area. This is approximately the footprint of maybe a middle school, the size that you would want. You can just see by its shape that it's broken up into houses or pods for grades 6, 7, 8, natural light all around with, you know, your core spaces in the middle. Obviously, we would demolish the existing school and maybe convert that to some fields. And depending upon what happens there, you could even turn this into maybe a field house or a little sports center, depending upon what the community would want. The goal would be to replace that building with an appropriate building for the next 50 years. This is real quick, just don't pay too much attention to the rendering, but you could see the intent. This building looks much different than, you know, we'll show you this one again. Than those, right? So,
It's one level, no.
no, there would be multiple levels there. It all depends on how you would structure the design. 2 6-story houses stacked or, you know. At Kirk, you have,
So just to be clear, because it may be confusing, at the stage we are right now, we're looking for what do we want to do? Once we do that, potentially it could be the same architect, potentially it could be a different architect, but actually design the building that would meet the specs that we've determined.
and again, this is all just to determine size and, you know, as you move forward to a certificate of necessity, you know, you want to make sure you can do what you're trying to do here. The Kirk Middle School is part of a much larger campus that works. Now, we would propose a significant amount of building improvements to Kirk to address both facility assessment issues, but also programmatically now to match what you may be doing at Gulger Cobbs. You have to keep in mind that this is a total package. You can't just build a new Gulger Cobbs and do nothing at Kirk and nothing at Shumadill, right? You've not created equity across the district. So at Kirk, there would be improvements that would include new century teaching and learning program spaces. So there's going to be new spaces in Gulger Cobbs. That type of space should also be provided at Kirk, as well as addressing anything here, windows or roofs that need to be done, restrooms, etc. At Shumadill, we are proposing basically demolishing the entire part of Shu, right? Keeping what was recently renovated, your 6th grade academy, I'll call it, although it's probably not an academy, but we'll keep it the 6th grade. There's a lot of under optimized space at Shoe. This part of the building was not renovated when Medill was. So we would consider at a, again, Dr. Shelton mentioned, very high level, demolish part of it and maybe go back with a smaller footprint for grades 7 and 8, keeping in mind that there are some communal spaces that would link the two. Maybe introduce additional fields and tracks at this location. A lot of this requires a lot more discussion with the community.
Would you see us demolishing Shoe and Gallagher at the same time?
No, this is, these would be phased.
And where would the students be housed from the schools that were being demolished?
The idea would be if you're gonna do, let's say Shoe first, those students would be split amongst
Kirk and
Cobb's,
Yeah.
Cobb's.
you have
And
have
once it-
capacity at the other middle schools.
Yeah, once Gardner Cobb's got built, then
So that goes back to the community's question, if we have capacity at those other schools, why are we building a new school? Which
That was my
is
question.
Getting asked. And I'm like, I don't wanna say, like Gallagher, it makes sense, Gallagher, you're leaving them intact and then moving them into a new building. But the community keeps asking me, and
Well,
they're
no,
not-
I'm sorry. You use Gallagher Cobb's goes first. You use Gallagher Cobb's as swing space for when you do Shoe.
Yes.
You
That is
use
possible.
the old Gallagher Cobb's for the Shoe students. And it's only for 2 grades of Shoe students.
That's
You could move the
Eventually
whole
move the whole thing over just for, it doesn't make sense.
So I think that speaks to this idea of a timeline maybe, and it has some milestones. I think that will help. So the middle school grade level scope of work would be approximately new 750 student, go ahead.
I just realized something that also might be a misunderstanding. That we will definitely have to do as we're going through with the public, trying to understand what the board's job is on this facilities master plan. When you do buildings, they don't do buildings based on a design and then you price out the design. It's actually a formula, right? The design has to fit the money allocated, not vice versa. So they don't need to have exactly what's gonna happen because that's not how we'll get funded. Now, for renovations, it's different. For renovations, you identify the renovations and figure it out. When we're talking about new school, that'll be a straight formula.
that becomes a problem because the only thing they've known is Byard and Bancroft, and it was basically the reverse.
That was that was 100% state fund.
Right, but that's what I'm saying, it was. the
Byard,
reverse.
Bancroft, Bancroft, Stubbs, Pulaski, and DSD and Brennan are all our most recent projects,
All that way.
all 100% state funded.
It doesn't.
So again, the middle school concept comprehensively. New building at Gallagher Cobb's, major ad reno including demolition at Shoe Medill, and then asset protection and building improvements at Kirk to provide equity across your entire middle school population. Provide equity across the district for the curriculum, keeping in mind there's some things we want to explore, maybe career tech, obviously special education, and also designing the school for the next 50 years. So the order of magnitude project cost at the middle school level is about 165 million, broken out, new 110,000 square foot middle school. This is based on the formula that Dr. Shelton just talked about at approximately 70 million. Kirk Middle School, 30 million, Shoe Medill, 65 million. So let's talking about the middle school. Questions, comments? The middle school is a tough part of the program because I think it would be difficult to only do one. I don't think consolidation to 2 is the right answer. So you're faced with investing in all 3 Again, this is a 10-year plan, so this may be on the farther out of the 10-year window.
I have a quick question. The formula, does it account for special needs? Since that is a large portion of what we need to be considering.
So when I look in the manual, it's really based on number of students. Tells you how many classrooms, how many science rooms, size of the cafeteria, the gym. It does account for some special need, but probably, I only saw 2 classrooms at that point when I looked on.
So the only thing, and it's not in the formula, but it is in the certificate of necessity, is when we identify the rooms that are gonna be for what we call statewide or countywide programs, which for us, DSD, which doesn't usually have inclusion rooms in our regular schools, Brennan, which does have lots of classrooms in our schools, and the REACH program, those are able to be funded 100% state, and that's kind of like, I'll call that an add-on, right? So they do the capacity or the square footage, and they put the formula against the square footage, and then the special programs addition, which is only for those very few kids, but that's an add-on. And we also need 5 classrooms. That's 100% state funded.
Okay, finishing up with the high schools. Newark High School underutilized, Glasgow underutilized, Christiana is at optimal utilization. All high schools have facility needs. So Newark's current enrollment is 1,000, district capacity 1,700. Glasgow 907, district capacity 1,200. Christiana 1,340, capacity 1,350.
Those capacity numbers are inclusive of special needs capacity or just the straight formula?
No, yeah, correct.
Oh,
the formula.
so we need to.
Same issue we've talked about throughout the program.
Do we, in your demographics, do we know how many of those high schoolers reside within the city?
We do, 500.
So 5, we'd have to take, do we know where?
Across the 3.
It's all 3.
Yes, I actually have it to the kid for this year,
Yeah.
but
Is it
for this conversation, 500.
So we would basically take 200 off of each one.
Now, because it's not even across.
That's what I'm asking, what's the
It, I
disproportion?
think for the sake of the conversation, like
It's 500.
it's 500 kids. Because we're gonna end up potentially moving and no matter what.
Whatever. Because the middle school wouldn't be affected, but the high schools would. By what's going on.
Those numbers are based on previous unit counts, right?
January 30th student count.
January 30th.
We do it twice a year now. We stayed out. Christina.
First grade.
We 1st through 8th, so it doesn't affect middle school. So that's what I was saying.
Just 500.
Students that take the bus from the city to one of your 3 schools, is 500 kids.
500 kids. Yeah.
No, it's not your, not 10th, 11th, 12th grade.
Something, yeah. Yeah, all 4 grades.
Your 9th, 10th, 11th,
You would
12th grade
potentially lose.
combined
kids.
is 500.
And if I look at the numbers based on art, like.
Because keep in mind, the 9th, 12th, 8th graders and Byron 8th graders aren't all coming to us.
No.
That's statewide. It doesn't matter what you're talking about. 8th graders, there's, I can't remember what the percentage is. It's like
And there's
10% more
70 of them.
high schools than there are middle schools. So they spread out at the high school.
You gotta remember in the city of Wilmington, there's all those charter high schools too, within 2 city blocks of us. So like a lot of them, we got Coomba, Great Oaks, Freer, pick one.
So we know that there are facility needs across the high schools. For those interested, the scopes of work are what we plan at the elementary schools, site improvements, roofs, windows, ADA restrooms, et cetera. So we know this need is across all three high schools. We moved forward with some considerations for Glasgow High School. And this was one of the comments, was possibly reduced from about 900 to 800 to free up some space to consolidate administration services from Eden and to relocate networks program from leased space here to Glasgow. In previous slides, sort of showed a block color plan of how that would work. What are the value added propositions here? At Glasgow, it really does no harm other than may limit some programs to go from 900 students to 800 students. It maintains the quality spaces, the pool, the gym, the auditorium. It reduces leased spaces for a special needs program, and it may initiate this consolidation or repurposing of your high schools based upon other variables that are happening. I would probably say the high school concept has a lot of moving parts, which I don't think any of us fully understand at this point. Over the next 10 years, there may be over the next 5-7 years, there may be a lot of changes at the high school level. That does not mean that some of the improvements that we have identified should not continue to be corrected and, you know, minor cap funding year over year. But I'm afraid I do not really have a complete high school plan that I could with certainty recommend and say, this is something to seriously consider. We have ideas, you have plenty of opportunity, but there's also plenty of variables here.
So, just for example, minor cap, George is working on Glasgow as well as Christiana High School renovating all the bathrooms. Right, which is a major need and will change both schools significantly with problem that's identified by our students and families every day. So like that's something we can do in minor cap. We don't have to wait for a full building renovation to do that.
And there appears to be some work here at Glasgow's vestibule.
The vestibule is from 2 years ago, safety and security money, but yes.
Still improving the facility.
Still improving the facility.
So at the high school level, we really needed to give you more of a range here of the level of investment between 75 to 90 million. I think before you answer here at this slide for questions, comments, or concerns, this might be the appropriate time to
Break into our,
break into our PowerPoint presentation.
all right, give me a second also.
Graduates. I can tell you right now.
Yep,
So if you round that up, we have 600 kids. We only have 500 kids.
Yeah, I forget. Ninety for the providers, they're coming in 90.
Okay.
What we did, pardon my voice. A little bit of walking pneumonia.
just stay close to the mic.
Let's stay over there.
Got antibiotics. Trying to.
Wait, what do we got?
Don't try it.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, don't try.
So this afternoon, George and I took the time out to put some numbers around the elementary, middle, and high school enhancements. And so what we thought would be helpful was be able to see the impact of each and how it translates into taxpayer impact. So if we were to do any of these or all of these in a 3, 6, 9-year plan, 10-year plan, this is broken out in that order. So the middle school is our largest, obviously. We estimate a $66 million local share of the total project. So going back to what we were talking about before, this is a 60-40 split between state and local. 40% would be our burden, or what equates to roughly 6.6 cents. That's cents, not dollars, because it could get a little tricky as we go deeper into this. For every $10 million that we need, it costs us roughly a penny per $100 of assessed tax value. That's language we're going to make a little easier in our referendum work as we try to make it a little bit more consumable for the average bear to look at and understand. The elementary is 29 million, or roughly 2.9 cents for $100 assessed value. And the high school is 36 million, or 3.6 cents. Pretty simple math, but then it's a question of when do you time this out? And as Dan is famous for doing, he throws the Rubik's Cube question of, okay, what's the best way to time this out so we can spend the money when money's dropping off and we're adding taxes on? So the total cost of all of it would be roughly 13.1 cents on the taxpayer. That would be roughly double what we're currently paying. So this may be a little bit small. I apologize. I had to break this into pennies so that you could see where we are today. Going into this new school year in 25, our tax rate for debt service will be 6.72 cents. I'm showing it in actual correct valuation here of 6.72 cents, with the idea that we would run a referendum in 25 of spring of 2025. Plugging in numbers to see if this works for us, we used the elementary plan, $29 million on the 20-year bond at 2%. And we are retiring previous debt service. In each of these lines from 25, 26, 27, 28, and 29, we're doing two things. We're adding on tax, but we're also retiring out. So it's a net number that you see up here, the debt service tax rate, which goes into our tax warrant that we get our board to approve every July for the upcoming school year. The tax warrant this upcoming year will be 672 for debt services. If we were to do the elementary plan, if we passed a referendum and got successful funding from the state, we would absorb the 29 million into a bond, and the difference would be, of course, the retirement of the debt. That would project out, we retire more debt. As you can see, we wind up going down in that tax rate because we're retiring more debt than we're taking on. Same thing in the following year. And then finally, in year 20, by 29, that's when we would kick in the bigger bond for the middle school in this scenario. So this is one way that we can plot this out to minimize impact on taxpayers, to do what we want to do in a way that incents and gets us moving in the right direction, hopefully takes advantage of state funds. We can get successful support there. And as Dan said before, we use some of that minor cap to do the other non-major cap work. So in each case, now this, I ran out of room here, but even in 29, we're retiring out debt. So this represents the net effect of both retiring out debt and adding on new debt as we fund this. We were at 10 cents in 2020, 2021. We were as high as 10 cents on debt service before. So our taxpayers have seen that. The problem is that's not the only line that's going to go up. There's other line items that have to go up in taxes if we do an operating referendum, if we do any more raise of tuition tax, which we must do with raising costs across the board. So in a silo, this looks appealing, but this has to be blended in with other taxes so that we can give the taxpayer a better story to tell. But that's the financial impact in a snapshot if we did it in this order, elementary, middle, and then project out. Now, we would say that this is another operating capital referendum rather down here. So we'd probably run in 28 for 29 to collect taxes in 2029. So that would be this represents the start of the second phase, and then the third phase would be 3 years out from that.
You have a question online. Go ahead, Monica.
So am I reading this right? The idea being for the elementary example that you gave, we would go out for referendum in the spring of 2025. And that would be for the 29 million bond in this elementary school. And so that would, the net would be 0.0128, but because we continue to have that 29 million, then we're dropping more debt. So the net is actually 0.03. Like, is that
down.
how I'm reading?
Correct. It's
So
going down.
It's not when we're
actually
starting it, it's just that continuation. Okay.
Yeah, so what's happening is I'm showing on each fiscal year the net result of retired debt and increased debt with the net result being, as you said, it's going down three tenths of a penny on that one, 3 cents on that one from on
Okay.
27.
All right, so it's not that it's like if the different years that we go out,
No,
we passed the referendum in spring, and so now we've added that bond. But when you think about what we're retiring, that added bond, the net range is we're still 29 would be then the time to do the next bond because we're starting to drop more debt.
right.
Okay,
Yeah, there's about 40 columns of data that you don't see on this spreadsheet that actually
I'm
shows
sure.
amortization and retiring. But this is
I
the
just-
final product to that. You've got it, Monica. That's right on the nose.
Okay, I just want to make sure the public, if they're watching this later, would also follow that. Thanks.
So this is just capital. We still have to deal with, we know we have to go out for operating.
Right.
So do we have, or can we create, like, if I were a taxpayer in this district and I would say, oh, okay, that looks great because I'm basically zeroing out. I'm not really adding anymore. I'm done. I'm taking it down to the layman person. I'm not, but we know that there's an operating referendum that's gonna come hand in hand with this. What, is there a way to put those two numbers or those two?
There's not only a way, there's a big plan with pictures and light shows.
So, but here's the thing, I know this sounds terrible, but we all know the difference between capital and operating. Not always does the public understand the difference between capital and operating. And
I know where your question is going, so I'm.
so before we like
Answer.
put all this out, like, how soon is that gonna be ready to?
That's why,
roll?
that's why I know the question you're asking, so.
Before we even like show this to the board.
So this is one part of it.
Right.
And this is based on formulas, based on numbers. This one, I don't want to say we control it, but there is a control for it.
Right.
On the operating side, we're gonna make a recommendation to the board. The board has complete control over what that
Right.
number will be.
Right.
So we can't right now guesstimate.
Could
And
we-
by the way, it's two different processes.
I know.
This is
I know,
just the
I know.
facility master plan.
No, but
The operating is going to be completely separate. And when we go to referendum, all the work around referendum flushes lots more things out because we know the numbers. We know what the state's approved, right? We don't know what the state's gonna approve yet. This doesn't, if the state only gives us a half of what we want for our elementary schools, then we have to completely revisit
I
what we're gonna do for the referendum.
And I,
You're asking for numbers.
I'm not
that have
asking for
too many-
numbers.
too
I'm
many
not asking
variables.
For numbers.
I think I can comment on one. The CBOC committee, which you joined us, thank you, has taken on the initiative, going back about 3 or 4 months ago, we've been specking out and we're in the process of developing a website capability that gives the taxpayer the ability to go in and see.
We just need I just need like one little screen that says operating coming, capital coming. This
We
is,
need more than that. So what we're doing,
but
we're
just
building the
to
ability,
keep them,
you go in.
because as soon as we
Can I
go,
finish my answer, please?
oh, sure.
Thank you. You're gonna give you the ability to look up your address and find out what all of these rate changes need to be on your tax bill. Operating, capital, tuition, debt service. But what we're going to do is deliver increment into the families immediately. All you have to do is install your home office. And
That's,
once we deliver that, which is gonna be developed over this summer, long before we go out. for that.
Let me use a real example. Where we are right now, in 2019, the number was 92 million. That's where we were in 2019. What did the number become? 15. So for us to put out, oh, it's gonna be 25 cents today, when it could be 2 cents when it's all said and done, it doesn't make any sense. We don't have those variables yet.
I just, like I said, they just need to, the public, and it doesn't have to be down to the numbers or even being able. It's just that once you say this to the board and it goes out on social media, it then becomes the public's chomping statement of, you're asking for this and you're asking for this and you're asking for this. They don't even listen to the details or what it is. And I'm just saying, we need to be ahead of the game with, as soon as you present that a capital referendum is gonna happen because we need it for the certificate. you need to be able to say, yes, we're gonna do these, and I think you've done a really good job of saying, we know that it's best to go out with them together. But a really quick informational snapshot of what the two mean. This means building, this means building, this means teachers and programs. It doesn't even have to have a number presented to it, but they need to understand the difference so that when they start talking to their neighbors and their communities and their civic associations, they're not already stamping down like, no, 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 because they understand the difference between the two.
So we were thinking as a committee, the cross-functional team includes teachers as well as school leaders, that what we were going to do is a multi-tiered communication process that would cover all of that. We would be going to buildings, we would be going out to the community, we would be going out to different community centers, but we would be starting with internal and communicating out to our school staff first and then out to the community. And that work is going to be rolling out months ahead of us. So that's all part of a comprehensive communication. It's going to be a more comprehensive plan than we followed in the past.
But there, I hear what you're saying and I understand your concern. There is a lot of very simple graphical information
Right.
that will be speaking.
Like as
So
soon
we're
as we
working-
say we're going to a capital referendum, we just need to make sure the public knows that we're going operational and capital.
Yeah.
And information will be
But
coming.
that's not where we are.
I know,
That's not until,
I know.
even if we get the CN, we're still talking, we wouldn't have that conversation until maybe November, December.
So the purpose of this was to give you a sense of context around when we talk about 66 million, 29 million.
What does that mean?
What does that mean to a taxpayer? What does that mean to our ongoing debt that we're providing? So this was not intended to pre-sell capital referendum as much as it was to set the expectation around this number translates into taxpayer impact for this discussion. It's not to get ahead of the whole referendum conversation.
So what is being presented to the board?
A book that has everything we've been talking about. It'll be in much more detail.
Okay.
These presentations have been to get feedback because that feedback informs the book. It informs the overall plan.
And what action are they supposed to be taking?
So there'll be multiple actions over the next year potentially.
No, in July.
So for the
What's-
July board meeting, it's the facility master plan.
Adopting it.
Big ideas, the direction we're going, the big bricks that we're gonna be picking up. Then in August would be the certificate of necessity, that first group of projects. What do we wanna ask the state for? That they have until November-ish, October-ish to, that's for the whole state. All of us turn them in August.
Right.
And they have to figure out how they're gonna divvy their money up across the entire state. If we are lucky enough, we may not be in the first year. If we're lucky enough to get capital money, then we take the capital money that they actually gave us and revisit the plan and the priorities in the plan, because there is the chance that they'll only fund pieces of it and not all of it. And so then we have to look at, okay, they might tell us, this is the piece we're giving you. Or they could say, okay, it's the renovations of elementary schools. Well, that would be, now we need to prioritize, right?
So what's gonna go to the state is the whole plan with a recommendation of the prioritization?
Yeah, so the way the CN is, the master plan becomes the largest supporting document
Right,
as to why we're asking for this.
and are we decided, or the board decide, who decides, like, this graphic says elementary first?
It's a version, right? So like
Right.
that's one option.
But is that
You
the
could see
thinking?
something.
So there's two, in all of the meetings, we've had prioritization has been leaning towards middle school first.
Uh-huh,
And sometimes elementary school first. It actually flipped a couple of months ago, because it depends on the audience, right?
right,
Overall, if you look at the burden, elementary first, middle school second makes the most sense for the
I think so.
financial situation, but it may not make the most sense for what the board's priorities are. And it's one of the questions for you guys tonight, is where your priorities are. Because in the end, right, if it's more important to do the middle school project first and everybody agrees and we have rah-rah and we have community support behind it, in the end, it ends up the same, right? It's just, it could be a tax raise of, 7, 8 cents, 10 cents in the first year, and then it falls off later.
Right.
Instead of keeping fairly consistent over time.
This maximizes retiring out debt, taking on debt with zero or minimal impact to a taxpayer. But to Dan's point, if you go middle school up, then you could wind up going up first before you come down, which could scare off.
I mean, this way, I mean, based on what you guys have the plan, it touches the most number of kids. And it gives the most bang for our buck because it gives us an early childhood. It deals with special programming in elementary that has more kids in it than middle and high school.
There's more
together.
capacity issues.
Yeah,
for the special.
it's back to how many families, how many kids, who are we?
I think the state priority for early education, it hits that as well, so.
So that's an important piece,
Yeah.
right? So the other thing is, well, why don't we just build another school for early childhood? Because that's our need. Find a property on 40 and build a new early childhood center. That actually would be amazing. The state funds 0% of early childhood facilities.
Zero down to.
$0 from the state for early childhood facilities.
That was one of the that again was one of the reasons of why utilizing an elementary school that had restrooms next to each classroom. Minimal investment, you can create yourself an early education center.
This goes back to, I realize you know, goes back to what the community doesn't realize or doesn't, right? Like we asked the same thing about units for when we put Lasky together. And you get 0 teaching units for early childhood. So you don't get the units except.
We get 0 units for the typical peers.
Excuse me.
We do
Zero.
get
We get them
money
for-
for our students with
Exactly.
disabilities.
Yeah, special services. So when you think about your location, you gotta basically cut it in half on the operating cost of support. So, and the outside person doesn't realize that when it comes to pockets of money, of where you can pull money from. Yeah, I think. and just
If we
based
could
on-
take Eden and tear down Eden and build a new early childhood center there, it's right next to the early Head Start. That is the perfect plan. And it wouldn't be horribly expensive. Early childhood centers are not terribly expensive. We can't get the state to give us a dime for that project. And they pay 60% most of the time.
And we did explore converting Eden to an early childhood center, and that's just not applicable. It's not appropriate. It's not set up like an existing elementary school is.
Based on the communities on the 40 corridor that have asked me questions, this is the most palatable community that I'm hearing of the choices. Just because they're saying, hey, there's a need for special programming, there's a need for an early childhood center, there's a need. And we don't already have in their mind something that can fill the need. The outside person looking in, and like you say, from a tax standpoint, you could sell this to somebody saying, you're basically zeroing it out.
And that's the essence of this analysis, is not so much the big picture taxpayer impact, which is a completely robust thing. It is when you take the investment and you take impact on families, what makes the most sense? And if you just did it dollars, this is a no-brainer, but it's bigger than that.
Yeah,
It does touch way more than just money.
The other problem is the people that we have our school families that support our referendums, but you got to remember, you also have that population that are in high years, that are the older population that are saying, I don't have kids in schools anymore. Why should I still have to pay? You probably did at some point in time.
This is Monica. Can I put a plug in for the middle school thoughts because I'm definitely a big supporter of expanding our early childhood programs. One of my concerns is the kids who are in our elementary schools now are the ones that would be considering continuing on into our middle schools. And so by improving our middle schools, that ideally lowers the loss of the transition from 5th to 6th grade. One of our big discussions this past year, one of my big concerns is safety and security and engagement with middle schoolers. And I honestly don't feel our current middle schools are the best set up to do that. And I feel that we could have a better setup for our kids from an engagement standpoint, from dealing with the hormones and the changes that happen at middle school, and the the pride and the going back to safety and security and climate. If our middle schools, especially I think of Gogger, with no natural light, and how that it's got to be tearing on not just the students but the staff as well, and how that affects learning. So those are my big concerns. I definitely love the elementary school concept. If I could do both at practically the same time, I'd be all for that. I certainly will support what the community wants, because I think they're both valuable. But as we talk safety and security and fighting and all these other things in our middle school, that's one of the reasons why I'm a bigger proponent. I think we have the bigger bang for our buck there. Those are my 2 cents.
What's the time? So every 3 years a capital? I mean, in an ideal scenario, we go out, say we pick elementary school first, it all passes, move ahead, finish the projects, we go out for the next one. It's at 3 years?
So, again,
It's all
driven by the state.
Okay,
We can make we
Right.
can make the most amazing plan. These guys can have the perfect plan. Everything is perfect.
Yeah.
The state pulls any percentage out of any one of them. We now have to reprioritize for the next CM.
yes, okay, gotcha.
So, yes, the plan, the big picture plan, the perfect plan,
Perfect plan would be every 3 years.
every 3 years roughly, we go out and we get exactly an entire chunk elementary, then an entire chunk middle, an entire chunk high school. I honestly don't have great hope that we will get 3 perfect CNs.
Right.
But maybe I'll be surprised.
And you may not get even one the first time.
Yeah, and it could be that this first, we don't get anything this year. We get nothing this year. And then we have to wait till the following year. And it could be that we can't wait on operating. So we go for just an operating referendum.
Next question.
Oh,
Can
okay.
we hold one more if we don't get a certificate of necessity this year? Could we hold off one more year for operating?
No, we're in the 5th year of the last referendum, which is a
It's
miracle.
real,
We
right, because it
stretched
was up.
that. We'll be in year 6 in 2020.
Okay.
So we really need to go. Or not to do it that way,
Is when you present it to the board with the proposal and the whole plan, I know the whole plan goes to the state. And they can pick and choose. Once they pick and choose what they give the certificate for, it comes back to the board to decide how to use that. Or do they have to use it the way it's spelled out in the plan?
It depends on how the CN comes back.
So if the CN came back and
They
said,
could come back and say, you have $20 million for elementary renovations. Which is not enough for what we want to do.
right,
But then we would be able to prioritize. But they could also come back and say, we're giving you 5 million for, I'm blanking, I'm gonna use middle school. We're only gonna give you 10 million for Kirk and 10 million for Shoe, and we're not giving you anything for that Gogger project. Then we have to decide how are we gonna play that out? The board can say, you know what? Thank you, but no, thank you. We're not gonna go to referendum. And we just basically give the state money back. I've never seen it happen, but it is something that could happen because of the way the certificate of necessity comes back. The board, that's why I'm saying to you, when
It
we're.
doesn't matter what we really want because.
And also, we're talking about things that are so far down the line
Yeah.
that it just doesn't make sense to even talk about them at this point.
We're closing in on 8 o'clock. Did you want to close it?
So no, I'm comfortable closing on these slides.
Do you want to go to your mentee to? So
Yeah,
That's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah, let's go back.
That's what I was asking. I want to close this down.
Yeah.
We're just on circles now.
Come on, close this down. This is good stuff.
Yeah,
You could split the screen.
by my mouse. Where were you last? You had a question?
It was just an open,
Yeah, I'm trying to. Out there. Right? Nope, that's not you.
well, let me,
Is that you?
it's me. Let's see if I can get this to work.
No, it's not you. No.
There you
Oh,
go.
there it is. Okay, this one.
So I want to offer this up to those joining us over Zoom. If there's any questions, comments, or concerns based upon some of the financial stuff that was relayed, or if you want to express any concerns about project prioritization.
Hi, I have a question. So my concern is just say that you get all of the funding and you start this 10-year project. And throughout the 10 years, the renovation goes up. What do you do in that case of matter? Do we go back and say we change things? Because things do change, prices do change, and supplies.
Yeah, so I can speak to that. So there's two things that affect that. The first is something called escalation. So as part of the CN process, when they're building the CN, there's actually a formula that takes that into account. It's called escalation. So they will take into account in the thing. Now, during COVID, escalation didn't work. It wasn't enough. And they had to go back to the legislature and ask for what they called market pressure money. Market pressure money is the reason why no CNs 2 years ago were approved. They only had money to fund already funded CNs because they added a bunch of market pressure money. So there's two safety valves there. I think the other thing that your question was kind of going to is if prices go up in 2-3 years, the goal would be you pass the referendum, you get the CN, you pass the referendum, you get the project on the books within a year and you bid it. So we lock into prices. We don't lock into prices the day we pass the referendum, but we get that design done within a year so that we do lock in our contractors to be able to say, no, this is what it's going to cost because you bid it. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it did. Thank you.
So a couple comments. Thank you for the details and robust discussion. So thank you to the participants. Another one, this is specific to maybe the district. What are the new white panels in our classrooms?
Yeah, they asked that in
Thermostats?
chat too. So if it's in the ceiling and has blue, green lights, it's Wi-Fi. If it's on the wall, I don't know what it is.
All right, tell Bob I love the pivot tables. Good job, Bob.
I don't know.
I also want to vote for a welcome back to school webinar. We can save money. Think about it.
I think that was aimed at you.
So again, this touches on the timeline Dr. Shelton had mentioned. You know, the Board of Education would adopt this facility master plan in July. The Board of Education approved submission of the certificate of necessity, depending upon what that is, in August. A DOE recommendation comes in October. CSD considers referendum, maybe February 2025. keeping in mind that 60-40 split between state and local. And I think that's all I have. I've probably questioned you to death, and thank you.
Keep in mind, if you have any additional comments, please feel free to send them along. They're going to be working very, very diligently to incorporate some of the stuff that we talked about tonight into the facility master plan. Goes to the board in July 9th.
Wait, no, no, no.